All right, let's get started. It's Thursday, March 27th, 1:30. This is the monthly AMATS Policy Committee meeting. We have an attendance from DEC, Ms. Edwards. Mr. Campbell is here from DOT. Mr. Michaelis is sitting in for the mayor currently. Which two of you are here today? Mr. Flynn and Mr. Birch are here from the Municipal Assembly.
Correct, Armando.
So with that, Craig, can you do your public involvement announcement?
You do it by now?
No.
All AMATS meetings are public meetings. The public is invited to comment on different items. If we have a business item, we'll have a presentation by staff or a consultant, and the committee will be given an opportunity to discuss it. And then at that point, the public will be invited to testify.
Okay. So we have before us an agenda. Do we have any known modifications, Mr. Lyon, at this point?
Sir.
Any committee suggestions for modification or changes? Or motions?
Move to approve the agenda.
Second. Any objections? Seeing none, agenda is approved. We have in our packet minutes from February 27th. And for the record, we've done a little more research on this. I'd like to remind everybody that you do not have to be in attendance at the meeting that the minutes were taken to vote on the approval of the minutes. So that seems to come up fairly often. People seem to have an attack of conscience that they were here to witness the minutes, but you don't have to be there to approve them. So do we have any corrections or modifications?
Mr. Chair, there are three minor changes on some people, the spelling of some people's names that we caught, but then I didn't print off the right ones. So they're just minor, and
Okay.
I can tell you them or just catch them, and then we'll move along.
So we have a couple of incorrect spellings in here. Anything else?
It's just on the front page there, that's all.
Okay. Anyone else with corrections or changes proposed to the minutes? Moved.
I'll second.
And seconded, thank you. Any objection to passage? Seeing none, the minutes are accepted. Thank you. Business items, number one, we have the AMATS urban zone boundary update.
You have the big map in front of you.
Okay.
And if you remember, we brought this up last month as an informational item, just preparing you for it. And again, we brought this to the committee a while ago and had our proposals, and you approved it, and then we sent it off to the feds, and they said, basically, you can smooth things in, you can add more parts to your boundary, that's allowed based on the census tract information, but you can't take stuff out. But we had, that was not the guideline that we were working under. So basically, you have a section of the Eagle River Park that we had smoothed out that in this map we are adding back in, and then some sections of the Anchorage Coastal Wildlife Refuge that we had smoothed out, we are adding back in for this map. And so we are just asking for your approval on that corrected map. This went through the TAC and they recommended its approval to you.
So my understanding is this makes the map consistent with the federal guidelines on census areas.
Right. Basically, when we draw this map, we use census tracts, and we are supposed to just use those census tracts, period, end of story. And we drew out the water because we thought we didn't think people were going to be urbanizing there, and we were incorrect.
Yeah.
So there we
The
go.
application of common sense has been rebuffed.
Don't really get away with the proof.
Is a public comment matter, Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Does anybody from the public have any comments on this map and proposed action? Seeing none, any comments from the collection here? Mr. Birch, is your motion still in effect?
Yeah, no, I think we talked about it before.
Mr. Flynn, did I hear a second from you?
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any objections to adoption of this map? Seeing none. We have the 2015-2018 draft tip release. Is this you also, Mr. Lyon?
This is me.
Okay.
A lot.
Great.
There's your regular legal size creature there. We've changed the front a little bit. So what you see now, you see the red in the center that says other funded projects within the municipality of Anchorage. Everything above that line is the table 3, 4, and 5. That is the allocation that AMATS decides. The stuff below the line are federal funding and some other funding that comes to Anchorage that we need to have reflected in the tip, but it's not part of the allocation that you folks decide. So the HSIP is down there, or would be down there, the transit, the national highway system, all that stuff is down there, but it's not part of the allocation. The stuff above is the stuff that you decide. And if you look at the far right side, you'll see the percentages there in red, 61.1%, 16.2%. They're also reflected on this smaller legal or letter size creature here that I handed out as well.
Couple pages back in the packet.
Yeah, a little page back in your packet. This is to remind you about the policies and procedures that AMATS adopted several years ago about how we decide the allocation, how much of our funds we decide should go to non-motorized, how much should go to CMAC, how much should go to pavement replacement, et cetera. And so you can see the column that says P&P targets. For example, it says the roads there not including the pavement replacement is 55 to 65%. And in this particular tip, we worked that out to about 61.1%. So obviously that is inside that 55 to 65%. And you can see the rest of them kind of line up there with what those policies and procedures suggested we should use. So that's what that is. Let me quickly refer to this larger with all the yellow. We saw this previously. This is the ranking for the roadways. I didn't include the non-motorized and the CMAC because those have not changed since since I've shown them to you before. But in this case, we took the ranking to the technical committee first, and they offered their suggestions on what we should fund maybe as a reconnaissance study first, which ones might not be best suited to this federal program and might work better somewhere else. And so the changes that have come since the last time you saw this is the line went down a little farther to Potter Drive rehab, and we had some more projects that we suggested were either better suited for other funding sources or a recon study first. So I just wanted to show you the updated version of this to just for information purposes. I wasn't going to go over it in too much detail, but I could answer questions about that. But then otherwise, again, this regular tip is what we suggested for the 30-day public review. The TAC saw it and recommended that you folks release it for 30 days. You can see those columns again showing that we're within the percentages of what the policy and procedures say for that. It's pretty similar to what you had before the last time we kind of talked about it. Again, table 3, 4, and 5 is the allocation that you guys get to decide on. We have the rest of the stuff in here for information purposes, really. But we would like to release it for 30 days for public review. We're probably going to get some more information on some of those tables. I did not hear back yet from the railroad. I know they're working on some of their projects there. There was just one in particular that they're waiting to give us the last information on. So other than that, we think it's pretty up to date with the latest information on the tables that aren't part of our allocation. I'm happy to answer questions about that, but this is basically our first stab at what we would like to propose for the next 4 years of federal funding within the AMATS area for your allocation.
Okay, well, let me ask the public if there's any questions from the public currently on this proposed draft release. Let's see there. I'm assuming, Mr. Flynn, you have some questions? You usually do.
How'd you guess?
Please, fire when ready.
First off, looking at the tables, I see we're using some AC money, but I don't see it aggregated anywhere. Do we have an idea of how much we're planning to use for advanced construction in the various years?
I haven't added it all up. We can come up with that.
That'd be helpful to see. It's nice to know kind of how much we're putting on credit. And that obviously has downstream effects.
Okay.
And then the other piece, I see all the chunks of Spinard Road here in the worksheet. But when I get to table 3, we had, and this is getting a little bit into the assembly weeds here, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. Project 2, Hillcrest to Benson for Spinard. We deferred some money from the road bond that's on the ballot Tuesday with the intent of replacing it with AMATS dollars. And I'm not sure we've fully compensated for that reduction in the bond here. Have you run this through PM&E and made sure that there's sufficient dollars for them to advance the project to the
Yeah.
schedule that they had planned?
The dollar figures that are in here are from PM&E. This is their number for 2015, that 1.5 million is what they told me they would need for that preliminary engineering. And the same thing with the design number in 2017. That's what they figured they would need for this, outside of any other funds they already have or are getting some other way.
I'm sort of speaking on behalf of Mr. Steele here, but I mean, I believe we had a more aggressive schedule than this. And so I test that to you, Mr. Michaelis. I don't think we anticipated waiting to 2019 to get this project up.
So, on the original schedule before it was reversed to AMATS, it was actually a faster schedule.
I know.
And, but this has slowed it down some. At 19, I didn't realize it was 19 for completion. Is
Yeah.
that what they,
We have right-of-way money in 19 in this tip, draft tip.
because we had some right-of-way money that we have right now, Craig, that we were planning on using, that we have right now, without using the federal funds.
Oh.
So that's why I think I think that's a good point. Make sure that is correct, numbers-wise.
I think we need to revisit that specific line item.
Because some right-of-way was going to be purchased without even going this route, so we had some for that.
Yeah.
But there's not a whole bunch of right-of-way that actually has to be procured, as I understand it.
No, it just has to be reclaimed.
Yeah. Correct. No, that's correct.
And I'm not an expert at the federal process in terms of the NEPA process, but I do know that when you federalize a process, you put 1 penny of federal dollars in there, the whole entire thing is federalized, no matter if 95% of it is going to be funded with state funds. And so
I recognize that.
the way this program works, and our chair could probably speak to it better than I could, but the way the program works is you have to complete all of your preliminary engineering before you can even start thinking of design, and you have to complete all of your design before you can do right-of-way. And this is the typical time, what we have in here is the typical time frame of how long it takes to do each phase in entirety. And you can't use my understanding is that you can't use right-of-way funds to buy something now that you're planning on doing later until you finish the phase. But-
So here's how I understand this thing is going down. What you're showing here is the federal fund portion, okay? However, there is in the plan right now money that's available that PM&E was planning on going ahead and spending in advance. It's money they have for this project, and they were going to do some things in advance. And one of the things that we're trying to work out with DOT, if they would just assign someone so that when we do this, it's not under their auspices, but at least they are agreeing with the process that we're following. So if that makes any sense, because there's some things that we can do right now with the money that we have, and that's what PM&E wants to do to try to advance the project. Okay, but it's still going to be following the federal schedule on some of these things. We have no choice. So
We can have us way out of this so that we don't spend much more time on this. Mr. Lyon, could you coordinate somebody from PM&E and somebody from Mr. Campbell's group to be here next month to provide a briefing on how they foresee this proceeding? So, and preferably above this item on the agenda, so that we have some clarity around it prior to the TIF being submitted to the state. Is that reasonable, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, and I guess I'll just, since we've already opened the door, I'll just walk through it too and
Please.
say that, I don't know, I've discussed this project with several of you individually, and I have concerns about its applicable delivery under the federal system. I think it's going to be a very challenging project to do in the federal system for a lot of different reasons. And so I don't think the schedule is out of bounds as far as the reasonableness of it under the federal system. A year or two for the design, for the environmental, I think is optimistic, if anything. This could be a 3 or 4 or 5 year environmental effort, in my opinion. A year or more for the design is not unrealistic. Another 2 years for the right-of-way acquisition is not unrealistic. These types of projects, as we all know, we've worked around Fireweed, we've worked around Arctic Boulevard, we've worked around Spinard Road. These are very challenging projects in the public eye. And under the federal process, those projects move, very slowly. So with all good intentions, I think that if this project really wants to move forward fast, it needs to move forward in a non-federal way. I've said that many times. I certainly believe that the body can move forward with this if they think it's the right thing to do, but I don't believe it's going to move forward expeditiously. So to that, I will certainly make somebody available to come next week or next month, and we can talk about it further. But I would not expect the news to be much different than this, because I think this probably is based on those conversations already.
And the one question I had was 19. I actually thought it was a year earlier than that, but I could have got those numbers wrong. But I do know that we want to advance and get started with some of the things we can do ourselves. So, but yeah, we all knew that the environmental was going to be a big piece, because we didn't have to do it before when we were doing the project. So this is that's going to add some time.
Okay, so,
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
any more, Mr. Birch, any comments or questions about the draft release? Consideration? Mr. Kales, any further discussion? Okay. I don't have any further comments either.
You want to approve?
I'll move for release, I think is what you want to do.
What is it?
Move for release for public review.
Okay. So moved.
Move for release. Second. And seconded. Any objections to release the 15-18 draft tip for public comment? Seeing none, that's approved. Next, we have the AMATS Freight Advisory Committee appointment.
There's a nice packet there. We have one new appointment, someone from the university. We have a university seat on there, and Dr. Jeff Miller was on there for some period of time, and it's actually moved down south, I think. But, so this is Dr. Philip Price, who is the chair of the Department of Logistics right now at UAA. So this fills the university seat there. And, made the resume here available for the committee members, and you can see it's pretty extensive. He has been to one of our freight committee meetings last week, and it was a really good addition. And it seems like he knows a lot of people on the committee already. So the technical committee met and recommended his approval to you folks.
Any comments from the public on the nominee? I'm not sure if that's appropriate. Do we take comments from the public on nominees?
It's a business item.
Okay, any comments from the committee?
Ever seen a CV that knows someone spoke Irish before? I'm Irish, I don't even speak Irish. You can leave that on the minutes, but I'll move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any objection to accepting Mr. Price under the federal, or under the Freight Mobility Committee? Seeing none. We now have the AMATS Bike and Ped Advisory Committee appointment.
Okay, so you have item 5D there. It's two-sided, and on the back is the actual committee list. We have one new appointment and two reappointments. When we started this committee, we staggered the terms because it was a brand-new committee, so two of those members' terms were up this year, and so we're asking for the reappointment of Carol Fink and Tim Kassedner, and a new appointment of Matt Johnson, our chair. Julia Peterson has moved, and so we needed to fill that public seat, and so Matt Johnson, who I know he's been a chair of like North Star Community Council, so he's been pretty active in the community, and we're that's the new appointment, and it was recommended at the technical committee for that appointment and the two reappointments. So,
Okay, I guess I'll follow the same basic procedure. Mr. Logan, would you care to comment on this at all?
I don't personally know the nominee, but I've heard many good things, and I'm very comfortable with the individual. I think he'll be great on the committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the public care to comment on this action? Anybody from
Mr. Kassedner is back in the corner of the room there.
Oh, I'm
He's the one of the
sorry.
reappointment there, so he's very active on the committee. We're happy to
Okay.
have him back on again.
I shouldn't have focused just on the new guy. I should have opened it up for all three. My mistake. I assumed that the returning members had already been vetted thoroughly and were acceptable. So, Okay, seeing no further comments there, any comments from the committee? Any concerns, issues to bring forward?
Move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Move approval, seconded, any objections to unanimous approval? Seeing none, all three are appointed to the Bike and Ped Advisory Committee. Other business items?
Don't have any other business items. I know Mr. Kenworthy is here, wanted to talk to you about some stuff, and that's the packet, that'd be informational item.
That would be an informational item, not a business item.
No more business items.
Mr. Kenworthy, how long would your presentation take?
6 minutes.
Would the board like to hear from Mr. Kenworthy for 6 minutes on, I'm assuming, Kabata-related issues?
I'd be delighted.
Absolutely.
I give him 6.5.
With possible interruptions.
Mr. Flynn, you are also on the clock. It's going to be 6 minutes combined time. Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I
Proceed.
gave these maps to the Technical Advisory Committee, and Mr. Brian Craig for suggesting I give them to you, too. You have 2 copies of the maps. I took the latest AMATS TAS data, which is in purple, Kabata's last data from 2011, their total revenue forecast, and HDR's recent numbers from when they did their run last year for the Wasilla bypass. And I gave them to the legislature. Since I have such technical respect for Jennifer Witt, I put in the maps that I gave the legislature the fact that DOT finds the HDR numbers, which are significantly lower than even the AMATS numbers, but really much lower than the Kabata numbers. She found them misleading because it was just not supposed, HDR wasn't going to do a regional forecast, they were just figuring out how the traffic flows through there. But I think they're good numbers because HDR took the 2010 census data, which people had not modeled before, looked at the population job locations, used DOL data where the jobs were, and then ground truthed it with existing latest traffic counts and then did a projection. HDR was counting on 172,000 people in Matsu in 2035. Kabata's number's been over 200. If you take the latest Department of Labor number from the census, it's growing at 2.35% a year in the valley, which gets you to about 155,000 people. So you notice some huge discrepancies here. Will there be 10,455 jobs in the Point McKenzie TAS zone in 2035, or will there be only 1,249? That's an 8 times difference. Will there be 9,400 people crossing the bridge when they told it? Because I think from now on, since all plans for the bridge are a toll bridge, not a free bridge, will there be 9,400 people crossing the bridge as a toll project, or 36,000? Just to give you an idea of the sensitivity of that, maybe this isn't news, but the difference between 9,400 people a day in 2035 and 36,000 is $250,000 a day. That's 90 million in that year. So these are huge differences. And I learned from Mr. Foster, the Kabata chair, talking at the Alliance breakfast today, that the reason the Cardno-Beck numbers aren't out, and they were supposed to do the basic demographic data, jobs, people, households by TAS data, aren't out, is because AMATS had a 90-day delay on the model. An answer that doesn't make sense to me, because Cardno-Beck was just supposed to do, they were supposed to do TAS data. They weren't modeling the traffic data. And that was supposed to be out September 30th. And then it was finally said late last year. So those numbers aren't out now. And the legislature's dealing with the moral guarantee of HB 23. So I think it raises 3 issues. The first issue is, can AMATS request the Cardno-Beck numbers now? Because I'm not sure they haven't been done. Mr. Foster's answer was not clear. But I think there's such good work going on between AMATS and the Valley. I think Kabata's the outlier, and I think it's time to get on top of that problem. The second issue it raises is, are you going to wait till the MTP update before you try to reconcile these large differences of numbers, both budget numbers and traffic numbers. Because to listen to Mr. Foster, basically, Cabada is outside the whole process. The money that Cabada would get from the 300 million state bond for being proposed, and even, which he did not discuss today, but if you look at section G of the current plan, which is a moral obligation of the state to backstop the shortfall that anybody would expect from trying to use TIFIA tolls to repay the proposed TIFIA loan that they haven't got. There's going to be a huge impact. And he talks about the federal TIP process, but I always think of it as one TIP process. So how long is the budget, is Cabada really outside your fiscal constraint issue that you have to deal with? Both in terms of the overall amount of money you'll have for everything, because he said it wouldn't affect AMATS's allocation. And how much you start trying to reconcile these differences. And and I think if you read again the FHWA certification letter when you were recertified as an MPO, I think that was a very clear statement that this kind of coordination was necessary to start. To be going years ago when that letter was sent, not just to wait for the MTP update. But I think that's an issue for the policy committee, and again the issue of whether the fiscal constraint issue. So did I take less than 3 minutes, Mr. Chair, or did I take 4?
You've got 40 seconds left.
Mr. Flynn can take it from there.
Mr. Flynn, any further comments?
I think Mr. Kenworthy makes some very good points, and I only wish some of my colleagues on the policy committee took them more seriously. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kenworthy. As always,
Mr.
very
Kenworthy.
informational. Okay. Committee comments. Mr. Birch, it's your swan song. It's time to tell us what you really think.
It's been fun. I started my service on on this type of body in Fairbanks with my service on the assembly up there in the mid-'80s to 90, and as a Fairbanks metropolitan area transportation study, much the same. And I have to say that just the caliber of the work that's come out of here and everything is just top drawer. You guys do a great job. Great support from the organization here. And actually, it was up in Fairbanks. Spent a week up there with the Arctic Winter Games. 2,000 young athletes competing. Just my wife and I volunteered up there. But as I was driving the roads, I was just thinking they haven't quite met all of their service peaks anticipated yet. But just the same, there's lots of great roads, and just enjoyed it. We have, I think, elections next Tuesday. I guess Monday's a holiday too, right? Is it Swords Day? I don't know. Is the state closed down? The city? We are now. But anyway, very much enjoyed it, and we'll be looking for some of these projects to manifest themselves in my neighborhood in South Anchorage and downtown. Kind of looking forward to this. The connection.
Highway.
Highway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Steele, would you care to comment?
No, I think good conversation, good information.
Thank you.
Looking
Mr. Flynn,
forward to
any further closing comments for today?
I'll just make my annual announcement that, as Mr. Birch noted, we do have an election next week, so this may or may not be my last meeting. Policy committee. So if it's not, I'll see you next month. If it is, it's been a pleasure.
And all our seats are up.
Okay. Ms. Edwards, any comments?
No comments from me today, thank you.
Mr. Michaelis?
No
anything?
comments, thank you.
Okay, I guess in closing, I'd like to thank Mr. Birch for his time and appreciate his efforts in this committee. I know that a lot of these things are consume way more time than perhaps some people can understand the value of, but I appreciate it. I actually appreciate all you guys coming to these things. I think that our underlying mission is good, and I think we have a lot of things to show for the work we've done here. And Chris, I think you can rest easy that you've done more than your share in helping this town and the road system in particular move forward. So I thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And with that, I will announce that our next TAC meeting is on, when is our next TAC meeting? It is April 10th, and our next policy committee is April 24th. And we are now adjourned. So we